You change horses' lives in the way that you do things. That's fun. That's enjoyable. That's fascinating. It's never ending. And can you do the same thing with people?
What do colt starting and Olympic eventing have in common? According to David O'Connor, more than you'd think. David O'Connor is more than an Olympic gold medalist. He's a 3-time Olympian, an international chef to keep, former president of USAF, and a lifelong student of horsemanship. He's helped shape national programs, mentored generations of riders, and stood at the intersection of tradition and progress for decades. But what makes this conversation powerful isn't just his resume, it's David's perspective. In this episode, recorded live at Road to the Horse, we explore what the next generation of riders is waking up to, that partnership is more powerful than pressure, and feel will take you farther than force ever could. So if you've ever felt caught between ambition and empathy, if you've ever questioned whether real connection belongs in the show ring, or if you're just trying to become the kind of rider your horse would choose, you're in the right place. Because this isn't just a conversation about horses. It's about changing the culture, one honest ride at a time.
Dear Horse World, it's David O'Connor.
David, welcome to the Dear Horse World podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I knew from the moment that I started this podcast that you were going to be season 1.
Oh, wow.
Yes. You were like top 5.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks.
Now, the reason for that is because every time I get a chance to talk to you, I get a history lesson. And I learn something.
That's because I'm old. I've been around for a lot of the history.
But you're also really good with history. Like,
I do.
Your retention is remarkable.
I study it a lot.
Why do you think it's important that we study our history?
Well, I think one of the first things is that the horses themselves really, except for the breeding specific side from a sports side, the horses' minds and things like that really haven't changed a lot, right? So the same type of things that you're dealing with, you can find in a book that's 400 years old. Mm-hmm. So I think one of those things is that you got to know and research what everybody's gone through. And there's nothing new that is happening in the sport world from a riding point of view, right? Except for, that changed back in, the way that they jumped. Mm-hmm. And, where the Italians started that much more forward seat riding side of the equation, and that changed the game. Mm-hmm. But nothing that we're doing from a horse's, understanding horses, doing horses, playing around with horses, from a psychological point of view, I think has really changed. Mm-hmm. What's changed is the games that we play. The games are much harder. While they say that, it's that war's fairly hard.
Yes,
but the games that we play are very, very specific now. And now that the horses have really turned from in this last really only 70 to 80 years, from a commodity, into a companion, mm-hmm. It has changed. There's a lot of people that are studying this and have time to study it. And it's not just the farm animal. It's not just that it has to go to war, or it's not just the transportation. But these fine aspects of the game that people study now is, I think it's pretty interesting. But you're relying on hundreds and hundreds of years of knowledge that has been passed up, anywhere from what you see in the Western world, with the vaqueros in Spain, where working cattle in there, that's where that came from, or, how the Australians ended up doing working cattle, how we did it working cattle, which is all a little bit different.
Yeah.
Every country is a little different, and how Europe, then the transportation was such a big deal, part of it, and we're the first in, because we're hardly in, here yet, of having people that were studying what is now called dressage, right? That
Yes.
were actually studied at it from the noble point of view, right? They were started as an art form. So if you can say during the Renaissance that the part that they were studying art forms
Yes.
in everything,
Yes.
horses was one of the art forms that they got to study. So it's, so you can find things really that are hundreds years old. Now, we might not agree with some of those techniques now, which I would be fully in favor of.
Yeah.
There are things that, where that's still that horse was more of a commodity, and now that has changed, I think it's take us to this next evolution in how we think about horses.
So interesting. See, everybody, this is why I always enjoy my chats with David. Okay, so you said something that I always think, so I think this is really interesting. This is something I recently learned. You mentioned that the more forward seat was developed by the Italians. Many of us, me included, thought for a very long time that George Morrison, the American style seat, was actually the first of its kind.
No, it was actually Caprilli in Italy as part of their cavalry system back in the late 1800s was the one that invented the forward seat. The one that really put it together is actually, and George's kind of one of his mentors, was actually General Chamberlain that came out of the Fort Riley in that system of the cavalry that he was the last commandant for, because the last cavalry horse was 1946. So, but the height of the cavalry education system in Fort Riley was between 1920 and 1938, 39. And he ran it, and so the books that General Chamberlain wrote, and he wrote in the Olympic Games, in eventing and jumping.
Wow.
Winning medals in both. Rode in 32 in Los Angeles. So he was really kind of the one to put a lot of that together. And he has that Hunters, Horses, and Hacks, right?
Yes.
General Chamberlain's book. And Horsemanship and Horsemastership. It's the other one that with Gordon Wright that wrote it. So that was really the start of the American style and system that George, really put together and was the style of Bill Steinkraus, our first gold medalist. That was that style that was so prevalent and changed the game in the 50s and 60s. Because now if you go to show jumping, there's similar riding now.
Yeah.
Where in the 60s, the styles were very, very different from American style to European style.
You think that there was more of a line in the sand?
Absolutely, which is where, even the old world championships, where everybody switched horses, the last four switched horses, which they don't do anymore, right? Because of the styles. The styles were so different. And it was fascinating at that point. Now where the styles are different, and they had two games here in Kentucky, and then in Knockin, it was the same thing. And the guys, they just hopped on each other's horses and jumped them around clean, and you're like, okay, well, the styles are so similar and the horses are so similar now that it didn't have the effect that it did back in the 50s and 60s.
Okay. I actually I haven't thought about it as that was the main test, was to showcase the two different styles. The various different styles. Yeah, because the French style was different than the German style, which was slightly different than the Italians and the Americans coming over here. And it was a lot because of the type of horses we were riding. The Americans, more thoroughbreds. The French, same thing, with the Celle Francais, the Arab thoroughbred mix. Yes.
And the Germans were on, big, more heavier horses. And so the styles were very different at that point. Now the horses, worldwide breeding has made the horses spectacular.
Yeah.
I mean, they are spectacular. I was just at the League of Nations just the other day, and it was stunning, staggering
it really
about
was.
The quality of the athleticism with those horses. It was really cool. So the game has evolved. It's evolved with the breeding side, and the styles then match the type of horses.
It's interesting. It makes me think of when I've talked a few times on the podcast about the tribes within the horse world, right? And then when you actually study it from a human behavior side of things, it's quite tribal, right?
Sure.
And so when we talk about all the different styles of riding within show jumping, let's say, or within the Olympic disciplines, you can even think about the tribes within the tribes, which makes me think of, the different, but we're becoming, you're saying about that we're becoming less sort of differentiated within, like, let's say show jumping, for example. We're less differentiated than we were before. Yeah,
because I think the horses are very similar now. It's a lighter horse. So the mixture of the warm bloods are lighter, and the thoroughbred has had an influence on that. So the style of horse now is very, very similar, and that is, I would say, in all the three Olympic disciplines.
Yeah.
Where dressage is much lighter than it used to be. Jumping is a lighter horse, and the same thing with eventing. I still think that the ideal event horse is still that 7/8 3/4 bred.
Really?
You still got to have a lot of thoroughbred in it. At the 5-star level. I won't say at all the other levels, but at the 5-star level, there's no question that thoroughbred has to be still a predominant thing because, even though the sport has changed from, even back when I was starting, in 1872 or whatever it was. So no, when I started, it was still, a long distance. We did 4.5 minute steeplechases and your hour facey and then 13-minute courses.
Yeah.
And now we're obviously ABC is gone, but the courses are down to 11.5 minutes, 12 minutes now, but it's the same number of efforts. And so what has happened is the intensity has gotten higher. Because the intensity is higher, it actually has the same type of an effect, slightly, on the horses. They switch to anaerobic actually quicker than what they did before.
Okay.
And with that, then they kind of get winded, or the muscles kind of get depleted, even where 10 minutes afterwards, they're just bright and shiny and jigging around again. But because of the intensity, that side of the equation, the fitness side of the equation, I think it's changed a little bit. And in some ways, I think it's actually becoming more aggressive for fitness. Yeah. You have to really do more high intensity interval work, kind of like CrossFit.
Yeah.
That type of thing to get your heart rates up and being able to sustain them. So
you see that the modern eventing horse, would you refer or would you draw a comparison to like more of a CrossFit athlete?
In some ways. They're obviously the dressage has gotten to a higher level, and the show jumping also to a higher level. It's 1.30 m and careful fences. And then the cross country course, again, the intensity has gotten way higher in that shorter time. Not just the accuracy and So in the 60s, they could have 2 combinations on course. That was it.
Really?
Yeah. And
wait, 2 combinations in the jump?
In the cross country.
In the cross country, you could only have 2 combinations.
Yeah. So now look at it. It's 45 efforts at a 5-star.
Yeah.
45 efforts of whatever it's amazing. A, B, C, D's, D's. And
there's unbelievable related fencing,
completely.
Like fence combinations.
So it's very, very technical and speed. But the horses, you have to, right from the beginning, you have to kind of train them to hunt fences. Which is actually kind of where we got involved in the natural horsemanship side of the equation.
Yeah.
Because the horses have got to hunt for them.
You have to okay, so before we dive, I'm so excited to dive into this with you. Okay, so before we transition into that area, I wanted to drop some fun facts, some fun trivia for everybody. So there are 4 individuals who have brought home individual gold medals for Team USA in the equestrian disciplines.
In the Olympics, yeah.
In the Olympics. They are you.
They are me, Tad Coffin,
in
1976. 2 of us in eventing, 2 in jumping. Joe Farges, 1984.
Yeah.
With that wonderful horse, Touch of Class, in LA. So LA, coming back to LA. Iconic. Here in another 3 years.
Yep.
And then Bill Steincrass in 1968 in Mexico on Snowbound.
So when we look at how far things have come from those 4 individuals, and you look at what we see now, what do you take away from the changes that have taken place? Like, what stands out to you that if someone is stepping into the sport now that doesn't have the historical context that you have?
I think that it's become so technically more difficult, and then it's raised the level of the riding, right? So show jumping, back in 1968 and those kind of defenses were huge, even bigger than they are now. But
they were. Like, some people stand next to photos of the
in Rome,
fences at Mexico.
George, you talk about in Rome, he was I drove by and my jaw dropped open because I couldn't believe that that's what we were going to have to jump.
Wow.
So the bigger, but the heavier rails, much more solid fences, so it would be, take it vertical, it might be 5 rails, 6 rails. Now that is 3 rails. The use of color, things like that are so different now, and it's so way more specific. So in show jumping, even, a half a mistake and you're not going to win. You might still place very well, but you're not going to win off of a half a mistake. And dressage has now obviously gotten to such a high level with the extravagance with the horses and their movement and the quality of their movement. And then eventing has just become, when all three phases, I think, has gone to a higher level, with dressage, doing the number of flying changes and the suppleness that they're asking for and the technicality of the lateral work and the intensity of the test. Like I really like at the Olympic Games, the test is actually quite short because of the number of people and television.
Yes, I didn't know this until recently.
Yeah, it's 4 minutes.
It's like you're all jam-packed.
But it's great in some ways for competitively, because when you go in the ring, you have it or you don't.
Yeah, like every second counts.
And not that your horse is going to settle during the test and then in the end he's amazing. No, you either have it or you don't. And I think from a competitive point of view, that's a great point of view. From a rider's point of view, that's nerve-wracking. And the cross country, as we said, has been more intense. And the show jumping is 1.30 m now, and much more show jumping where the technicality, related distances, and how everything is related together has gone to a higher level than used to be.
So what have we left behind that you wish we hadn't?
I'd say from our sport, the only thing that the lack of the steeplechase, not doing steeplechase, I think was a great rider's technique. Yeah? Much more than the horses. But from a rider's technique, you'd be able to ride, it was 690, 690 meters a minute for 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes, depends. Okay. And not having that, so cross country was, when you went cross country, it wasn't the fastest thing you'd done. Yeah. And I think that relation to speed and galloping and all that kind of stuff is a missed technique that we don't have with the riders anymore. Now, Michael Young's never done a steeplechase probably in his life, but he's pretty good. He's pretty good. He's pretty good. Yeah. So, there's always just the trades and balances of the whole thing. I do think that it's without the steeplechase and roads and tracks and things like that, it's not as hard on the horses. And everybody talks, well, it's just a different ticket. Well, the horses used to tie up a lot in the old format. And a lot of horses didn't come out of the box, the 10-minute box, because tying up was a bigger issue. And now that doesn't happen hardly at all. So I think it is better for the horses in the long run. Really interesting.
Okay, so I want to segment into what you talked about hunting for fences and how, so we're going to first talk a little bit about, there was a moment in your career, you're one of the most high profile eventing riders names within the sport. You have an Olympic gold medal, and you and your wife, Karen, introduce a way of thinking about horse training to the horse world that caused a little bit of a buzz.
That would be the understatement.
Okay. So let's share with everybody, let's set the scene. What year was it?
It was 1990. Okay. And that was the year actually I went to the World Championships on a horse called Wilton Fair. Okay. I had won Kentucky here the year before. And actually that horse was the one that got me started on different roads, because he was a big horse. He was 17.3. He was a big horse. And he had, Mark Todd had actually won Burley on him. And then he was bought by another American. And that didn't go so well. So he was actually sent to us to sell. Okay. And Karen didn't want to ride him because he was 17.3, even though she ended up riding Pico. So she asked me if I would ride him, and took him. And then really kind of nobody wanted him. And just his being around him, because he was so big, I realized that a lot of the things he said, he was scared. He was worried about things. Because he was so big. So he didn't fit, like going into a stall. The typical one that runs through they run into a stall faster trying to get it over with. Yeah. Because he doesn't fit in the door, and he doesn't fit in the corners of the dressage ring. And so that caused a lot. So that was part of my education with him. He taught me that. about showing him another way to be able to do that, and that he does fit. And then he was fantastic. He won 2, now 4 stars with me, and went to a Worlds, and he was great, and he was a wonderful person. So that time kind of put me out of thinking, just there's got to be a different way. And I want to back up a little bit. So to remember that all of the 3 disciplines were created by the military.
Yes. Ooh, yay. Okay.
And because of that, the military, that commodity companion thing like that, it had to happen now. And now it's brought up, and most of us were brought up under that first or second generation away from the military when we were kids. And things had to happen now. I mean, they had to happen now. And
we had a different relationship with horses then.
A little bit of a different relationship. Well, this was a horse when I went out on my own after being with Jack for 4 years, which was fantastic. It's kind of really, in some ways, where you got your master's degree off of him. Yeah. There's got to be, this is in the back of my mind, there's got to be a different way. I don't like getting pushy with horses. And I was, because I was a kid and ambitious and, did, I wouldn't say things that I would have been ashamed of in public, but I would say ashamed of with my horses, because I was like, now, wait a minute, there's just got to be a different way. I can't push this hard or be this angry or emotional. So, you starting to think about it. And I was riding with some people out who were great owners and syndicate members, and fun to teach clinics out there out in Salt Lake City. They own a horse called On a Mission, who went to a Worlds and did some things. We went to Europe together. It was fun. They're great people. And there was a guy named Gene Lewis who used to come there and teach. Yeah. And they had a long-standing relationship. Gene had been going out there for 20 years of teaching. And Gene was one of our leading trainers back in the 60s, jumper trainers. And, I met him there, and you always just sit down and talk and learn, and then get them to talk if you can. So I'd seen him jump a horse online. So on the end of a rope. Yes. And
had you ever seen that before?
No. I mean, not besides the typical lunging thing that people do, the European style, more lunging side.
But Gene did it differently.
Yeah, he did it differently. And the other cool thing is that he could actually do it from another horse. He could do it from his cow pony, which means you could jump bigger fences and combinations. And the thing that I got intrigued by, not just the technique of how, that was pretty cool to watch, is the horses' ears and eyes picking up fences from 5 or 6 strides away and studying them as they come down. And seeing that was like, I really want to know about that, because that's going to help me in my job. If I can get horses to look like that, all ears and eyes, picking up whatever the puzzle is from farther away. And now both of you are working together about solving the puzzle. Yes. And that's how it started. So I went out the next morning with him at one of these things, and I said, can you show me? And he was like, yeah, come on out. And there was an advantage, because when I was a kid, I rode across the country, from Maryland to Oregon. So,
I remember you telling me this.
So I did that, and I had learned a rope
Wait, you need to tell everybody what you mean when you say you rode from Maryland to...
Yeah, I rode from Maryland to Oregon. My mother, my brother, and I, when I was 11, my brother was 13, and we rode all the way across the country.
On horses?
On horses, yeah.
Just
so that's a whole nother podcast.
Okay, we'll have to do another podcast. But that is such an impressionable experience.
Sure, especially as a kid. So I had a guy teach me how to rope in Nebraska, and I roped everything from Nebraska to Oregon, every daisy and rock and post and whatever you could find.
Okay, so you knew what to do with a rope.
And that was a huge advantage.
That is a huge advantage.
Because I didn't have to think about that side of the equation. And I went out and worked on a cattle ranch in Laramie for a couple of summers when I was in my middle teens. And we used to rope and just on the ranch. And so not having to think about the rope was huge. I didn't have to teach myself that. And so I could pick up what he was doing really, really quick. But the lesson was, okay, look for this, watch this, go like that, and put yourself in this position. And that was it. That was the lesson. And I'm a visual learner anyway, so you're just watching him, right? And I was living in England in the time, and actually went back, and we had a round pen there. And for the next 4 years, I took everything in a round pen that I could get, any horse, any whatever, and just taught myself how to do it, and taught myself how to jump online, and just taught myself how to do it. And it was, very impressionable. I think you learn about space. You learn about pressure lines, which is pressure line for me is the distance between you and something, whatever it is. And then suddenly it opens up your eyes, because everything around you becomes a round pen. Your farm is a round pen, your field is a round pen, your round pen is a round pen. And how you see space. And then because you start to see that space and how the horse sees that space. And how can I help him by releasing pressure at times that he can understand it to something that he's maybe worried about. And by releasing the pressure and allowing him, that suddenly that goes away and he finds it, and that becomes a thought process of how to solve things, that suddenly they are looking for things, because they're most of them are naturally inquisitive. Horses all wide variety, just like people, wide variety of personalities, but they're quite inquisitive about things. And so it just changed the whole thought process of what I learned in a round pen and the jumping online and the 10 or 12 things that you have to learn in order to be able to do that changes so much of how you deal with horses on an everyday basis. In a wash stall, in a trailer, in a stall, in everything that you're doing. It changes the changes the dynamic and changes the thought process. And now it's still fascinating. It still fascinates me every day that I get to do it. So he was the one that kind of changed that game on me.
It's remarkable because I love when we get sort of like a Venn diagram of two podcasts. So as you're talking about Jean Lewis, I'm thinking of the amazing podcast we had with Martin Black and how he talked about how impressionable. Right. And here, Martin Black, like from a totally different part, a different tribe of the horse world, but someone who was also heavily impacted by Jean Lewis.
Yeah, Jean Lewis and Ray Hunt were very, very good friends. And actually, if you read Ray's book, Think Harmony with Horses, look at the foreword. It's written by Jean. So they were very good friends and very similar, styles. Then you start to investigate in it. I'm a big reader and studier of things, and you find out about Tom Dorrance, and you find about all, you follow these lines and thought processes going down, and it's a never-ending learning cycle about you. Every horse is going to teach you something, and you have techniques and everything that I go to things to watch and study, because I'm kind of, again, that visual learner side of the equation. And you're applying these techniques all the time. And by having the horses choose to jump the fences, by online, we teach all of our horses to jump by themselves first, all the cross-country fences, not narrows, but banks and ditches and waters. They all learn that on their own first. And then, so they already know how to jump when they get on, or we get on. And so when you hop on, they already know how to do it. And so off they go. And there's no real tension about it. It's just a game to play. And then suddenly they want to solve the game. They want to play the game. And that makes your job so easier. And it's also changed the way that I even really think about young horses. Because up to the training level, really modified level and eventing, I don't really care how they jump. I really don't care. Really? I just care that they jump and that they like it. And it's a game and it's fun. As their styles, they get older and they become stronger, and your exercises that you do on the flat work, which are gym exercises, as all of that gets stronger and better and all that kind of stuff, they will change their style to get quicker for the more difficult exercises that are coming up. So when they're younger, I don't really, they'll turn into that. So I don't really care. I just literally want them to enjoy it. So they're hunting these fences on their own, looking for the game, all the way up through that level. And then the preliminary level is when it starts to become more and more technical. And so having that patience for that, because that'll be fine next year. By next year, this time next year, that'll be different. And having that patience, I think, is also something that these type of things bring you to.
That's really cool to hear that. As you were talking about how working with Jean Lewis changed the way that you saw the world, literally like changed how you felt space and how you felt, like the way you say, like around, you know, your farm is around pen, the field is around pen. Like I never thought about it that way. As you were talking, are you a Star Wars fan?
Well, I've watched them.
Okay.
Yeah.
It literally made me think of the Force.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it made me think of, if we spend all of our time with horses only in the saddle, do we miss out on the opportunity to feel what that feeling is, which is and I'm not saying you don't get it in the saddle, you definitely do, but there's that experience that you got, which was observing horses and having a completely different spatial awareness with horses. It kind of reminds me of the Force, like how...
Sure, and I would agree with you in the awareness side, because I think that is one of the things we try to teach we teach all of our people these techniques on the ground.
Yeah.
Right. And we work with amateurs when we did our camps, you know, we did for a long time. Karen and I, this always started. We started every morning. Everybody learned the basics of it. Right. Yeah. So, and they said, all right, if you're more interested, there's lots of people to go study from. Yeah. But the basics of it, we wouldn't get them to where they could trot a pole on the ground, but they weren't ready to jump because you only got 5 days. Yeah. But this is how we communicate. So, you know, how we communicate is a form of putting pressure on and taking pressure off.
Yeah.
There's no way around that, right? So what a leg is, so what a hand is, what a seat is, the natural aids that we use. So getting people to understand them, they learn the ability of, and I'm a big believer that a lot of the times, the release of the pressure is actually a lot of times the learning moment. That's the learning tool. Yeah. And a lot of getting people to learn that on the ground, and they see it and then apply it to their riding instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think there's a time that you can learn that thought process, and everybody talks about it. You read any book about after the half halt you have to give, you know, da-da-da-da. So they say it everywhere, but how does a rider actually learn that feel? Well, here there's a part where you can learn that feel on the ground and see it. And then you can apply that same thought process to the riding. And I think that's been a successful progression for people to learn that we teach and help, and that we help with their horses, is for them to learn that.
Well, and also if you're someone who's like, you talk about being a visual learner, right? So when you're riding, it's more happening, and you correct me if or let me know if you think this is right or wrong. But like when you're riding, it's a feeling, like it's the release of pressure, the give and take that's taking place. It's not something that you're watching. You're not watching yourself.
Sure.
Right? It's happening in real time, kind of within your own being and within the horse's being.
Sure.
But you're not watching it. When you have a horse online, or when you have a horse at liberty and this is taking place, you're visually watching what's taking place as a result of your ability or your fluency within pressure and release and within that encompassing feel.
Yeah, and if you think of that from a kid's point of view or an amateur's point of view, you've taken the fear away, anxiety of falling off.
Right.
Right. So if I take that away and they can learn the skill and then apply the skill without that, when they're not having to deal with anxiety or fear at the same time, just because they don't want to fall off. I don't want to fall off either. Then it hits home easier, right, for you to be able to do that, because you want to try to have horses that are light, which means, you're operant conditioning. I mean, it's a learning theory, right, of what we're doing. So it's a very scientific learning theory of how people learn and how animals learn. And the timing of that becomes the important thing. If you have anybody that you really, really like to watch the ride and they get on your horse and you're like, I don't know how they did that, and the horse changes and I didn't see anything, doesn't mean that there just wasn't 1,000 things happening.
Yes.
But the timing of it is, by somebody that's, good and, and experienced, the timing of it is that's where it comes from. It's not just the technique, but the timing of the technique. Because to give at the right time, it's going to sound really strange, but the give at the right time is when the horse changes his mind to do it. He actually physically hasn't done it yet, but he's changed his mind to do it. And you give it that moment and it just hits home. And that's how horses get light and responsive and engaged. And that takes experience.
Yes.
And it takes timing, and it takes study. I have a theory about how people learn sports. The first thing you have to learn is technique. How do I sit in saddle? How do I hold the reins? How do I hold a tennis club? How do I hold a golf club? How do I swing it? And then the next thing is the theory of the game, whatever the theory is. And then that leads to instinctual actions. Mm-hmm. So for me, then the definition of the instinctual action is that you react before you think about it. Just like when we do it when we drive in a car.
Yeah.
We don't think about it now. But if you remember the first time you drove a car, you were like, good, a sign, speed,
Well, because it's having to go through your brain first.
Right. So when it gets subconscious, right, that's where that instinctual moment, that's where most amateurs, the people that are not studying it, will drop off.
Yeah.
And I believe that in the end, our job as instructors is to take people to that level. They're fun, they're challenged, they're still fully in it. Because then the next thing, it takes the full study, which takes multiple horses, time, you're spending all the time, and intuition, where you start to set up the game. And the last thing is imagination, which you don't teach. You only mentor. So, I think that's kind of the 5 levels of how people learn any sport. And realizing where somebody is in that game.
Yes.
Are they on the technique side, or are they not understanding the theory side? And you're looking for those moments of instinct when somebody's reacted. Oh, they got it and they feel it, right? Do they feel it? Do they recognize it? And that's where most people that are riding one horse a day, or 4 times a week or whatever, that's their goal.
Yeah.
And they can have a whole ton of fun up to lots of levels from that. After that, it becomes more of a full-on study.
In some sports, we call that flow state.
Sure.
Which is when your brain actually is the pre and post, your brain is very much a part of it.
Sure.
But when you're in flow state, your brain is actually almost like politely asked to just observe.
Yeah. And being in the moment so much that you're, every athlete, every sport talks about that side of the equation, right? Yeah. When you get that zone, people talk about being in zone or whatever. Every sport has that, and every sport has the same thing where you don't know why you're not, because you've done everything to get there, and then suddenly, where'd that go?
Yeah.
So that's the fun part about sports. You never totally have it.
This is remarkable. I've not heard it explained like that before. And what I found to be profound as I found my own journey in natural horsemanship and in the Western side of things, because I'm very curious to hear what you think about this. So we're here at Road to the Horse, a colt starting competition. You're watching people who have actually in many cases, dedicated their entire life to starting horses. When I've watched Martin Black start horses, I never, coming from a show jumping background, I had never understood that every single thing that you do can inform 10 steps down the line. So to sort of summarize months and months and months of study is that when we understand on the ground our relationship with pressure and release, and when we can really understand communication, it completely changes your relationship with the aids. Completely. I don't think you can achieve, do you believe you can achieve that level of depth of understanding, of big picture understanding of the aids with your seat, your leg, your hand, when it comes to pressure and release, if you have not experienced the nuances of pressure and release with a horse that's never been started before?
I think you probably can. There's lots of techniques of people coming at it from different worlds. So you wouldn't want to, put somebody in the silo. You'll never get it. Yeah. Just because you don't do young horses. But I think starting horses is obviously something I really enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. And I think, and we teach all of our people that come through our long-term apprentices. They all learn how to start horses because their careers go up and down. They always have a job because they can start a horse. But yes, the reaction and very much getting into the thought process of what the horse is thinking, not just what he's doing. And how do I shape his world physically, that leads to him mentally feeling more comfortable, right? And feeling like, one, you're always a partner with him, which they don't believe at the beginning because they don't know why you should be a partner. And suddenly you are their partner, which is that's an amazing thing with horses. And how you do that physically with them to shape their mental side. And that does change your thought process. I think even at the very, very top levels, it should make you clearer.
Yeah.
And end up being lighter because of that study. It makes you study all the time. Because with a young horse, I always feel like when we're starting young horses and we go into a pen or we do things like that, right? Which is very different from this environment and the road to the horse because there's a timeline.
Yes.
Because it's a competition and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm in a time warp. And these, you get these guys out on the road that say, well, I can get this connection in, 7 minutes or what. And I'm like, who cares?
Yeah.
If it takes you 7 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever, it's whatever the horse will, where they're going to take you.
Yes.
So I know whenever I jump on a horse online or working online on rope, and it's hard to say online anymore because of everybody thinks it's something different.
I know it is,
but I got to still probably have to figure out another phrase.
Space line.
Right. Yeah. But when you're doing that or in a pen, working in a round pen, I'm in a complete time warp. Complete. And it's like a bubble that's around you, and it's just you and the horse and their thing. And I don't know. I don't see anything else except for you see all the things that will affect it.
Yeah.
The dog that runs by or the whatever, you see that, but I go into a time warp. I wouldn't know how long it takes.
I think that's
it doesn't ever take very long.
I think that's what they call presence. Complete.
Yeah, being present is no question. I think that is a very important skill to learn in sport. Going cross country and doing for us, the 3 phases, being very, very present at that time is, and that ability to focus with that without getting over-focused, without getting lost. So you don't see the dog or you don't see the balloon or you don't see the whatever. Yeah. That's part of the sport. That is fun.
Okay. So going back to, you learn how to jump a horse online. You're in England. You and Karen are based in England.
Based in England at that time.
And you've just had your mind blown by Jean Lewis. And all of a sudden the world is a round pen for you.
Sure.
Okay. Now what?
Still is.
Still is. Okay. So now what? What happened? And what year are we, like, roughly?
So we're in 90. I went over at 90 and I came back here in the United States in 94 and was already starting, jumping horses online in public and like at an event for a warm-up. And people had just thought I'd lost my mind. Lost my mind. And they were like, why is it needed and whatever, So, but I kept doing my thing. People, and then I had a lot of people then were bringing me some horses that were difficult, when you put them in a pen to work and da-da-da-da-da. But you couldn't, I didn't really have it sophisticated enough to help the people do it, and so they weren't doing, so the horses all got better, but then the people wouldn't do it. So then I started to look for around or got interested with people that were teaching it. So I didn't know anybody. I saw John Lyons on video. I saw Buck Brannaman's thing on video. I'd seen that.
Well, and this is the time of VHS.
Yeah,
so it's not like you could go on the internet and Google,
you had to go find it.
who is jumping a horse online.
Right. Monty Roberts, because he had had a presence in England.
Yes.
So I had heard about him and looked up his stuff. That round pen thing is interesting because he tried it one time. Well, he spent a month doing it with deer on his ranch.
Yes.
So
talk about making the world your round pen.
So that's where I thought about actually everything is a round pen. This whole park here in Kentucky is a round pen. Usually that's what sidebar, but when if the horses get loose or whatever, I'm usually going the opposite way.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to go to where the horses are going to go, not where they are.
Yeah.
Here, catch me. so you're starting to you're starting to look at that and study it. And so then I was trying to find out, how do you get other people to understand this?
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing a clinic in Florida, and Pat Burley was, and I don't know who he was doing a demonstration thing at the same place, doing it that night. Mm. And so I stopped and just watched it. And he was actually, it was obviously a show and et cetera, but he was actually very good, because he had a couple horses that weren't going to be that good. And he just like, it's not going to happen today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I like that.
Mm.
And so, we started going, and he saw the opportunity for him. And I, thought it was a way to get people to learn, things like that. And kind of, we did some things together for a number of years. And I think ended up being a benefit. It also, there was a little bit of negative side, because it was maybe a bridge too far too fast for some people, and the show thing, is not normal to our world.
Yes.
And so people back off of that a bit. But I learned a lot, not so much, but just about the horse thing. You learn about watching again. Yeah. But learning how to present to the public, learning how to do things like that was also really, really educational. Because when you do go to an equine affair or something like that, the last thing you do is teach a lesson, because everybody just falls asleep.
Right.
So there has to be entertainment, and we obviously have a lot of stories, and and you have an actor. I have a little bit of an actor side to me that the switch can go on.
Yeah.
And so we put together these programs that when we did things. And I met a lot of really, really good people. And it's why even here, Road the Horse, I'm known here because of my doing demonstrations and trying to be a bridge between the two sides, what you can learn in that natural horsemanship and Western world. Mm-hmm. And, and how do you apply it to our world? Because the horses don't think any different.
Yeah, they don't see the difference.
No, it's something faster, something slower. That's just like people. But in the end, the horses are not thinking any different. So if the language is the same, and learning the language before you learn, the game that you want to play, becomes an important message to get across. And I felt like that we could be one of those bridges between that side. And so I made a lot of friends, Dan, James, and I here, we're good friends, and we do a lot. But we met doing demonstrations, and he came out and watch my horses do things. And so I always, at the end of those things, when we were doing them hard, I always jump bridleless at the end. So you usually do 4 sessions. Yeah. And I always jump bridleless at the end to get people to say, not that you have to jump bridleless in order to be good, but what's control?
Ooh. Okay, wait.
So
I didn't think we were going to go here in the podcast, but now.
But so it was that exploration of that I think makes you, just study horses more and be better at the craft. And I think it makes you a better cross country rider, and because you see space different. It certainly makes you a better dressage rider because you see space different. And same thing with the show jumping, right? About giving them space or closing space or whatever you need to do. So it makes you think a little bit different. And so we backed away from a little bit the being systematic. We had Karen and I had kind of had a big brand.
Yes. And
we kind of let it go because it didn't want the tail to start wagging the dog, where suddenly the commercial side becomes driving it. And I didn't really want to go there in my life. And I don't think Karen did either. So we backed off of that side and made it smaller.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Because that very much happens in the horse world.
Sure.
And maybe, I think it's really interesting you talk about the tail wagging the dog, because that really has shaped we've seen a lot of things happen in the horse world when that does happen, when approach becomes really commercialized. Yeah. And do you think does it lose something in that? Well,
there's still, I think you talk about the balance of it, right? Is the balance for the general public to be able to come and get that type of information and play with it, maybe get some help, even though it's on a larger scale. Is that a benefit? Absolutely.
Yeah.
To study some of the finer crafts of it, you're not going to get, you won't have the time to get to that.
Yeah.
So, but do I think it's an overall benefit? Yes, I do. I think people can take it too far. Well, if your horse can't do that, then he can't do all the other things. Well, I don't really teach my horses to stand on a thing,
like a pedestal.
A pedestal, right?
Yeah.
But they sure do go cross country pretty well. So, and people can get into, as you say, what I call silos, you call your tribes.
Yeah.
People can get into silos while you can't. Like, no, that's not true. I mean, learn from each other and put it together.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I've really found in this exploration. I call it equine anthropology. It's like, sure. It's studying what is different amongst the tribes, and then also what is similar amongst the tribes.
Sure.
And
there's more similarities than there are
much
differences.
More. And also there's so much that we can learn from one another. Yeah. Like, I think there are some tribes within the horse world that have made profound advances in certain areas, just like others. I think that, and we each have something, like everyone has something to teach one another. Sure. That's what's so remarkable, right? And then what's truly universal is the horse. And
I think what you want to study, if you're a student, right?
Yes.
I remember going down and taking a 5-day cutting clinic down in Texas and loved it, and kind of what you learn from that. What there's 3 things that you're going to go back into. You're not going to change how I'm going to ride my cross-country horse,
right,
or dressage, but there's 3 things in there that I can apply that, so I get to do that. And I'm lucky in my world because I do a lot of administrative things and have always been, because you have to give back to the sport. I was brought up that way. So when I was president of the federation, and I always said that I was president of the federation because of what I learned in a round pen, because we came through a very, very difficult, angry time in the sports, and the hardest thing to teach anybody in round pen is to learn how to back up, is to retreat. Hardest thing to teach anybody.
Really?
Yeah, because as a person, you're always, people are like that. They're always going forward. The hardest thing to teach somebody is to retreat and to back up. And when you back up, you release the pressure.
Yeah. And
the horses want to close it. They come to you, right? Mm-hmm. So I do that all the time with people. Same thing. So, but in the administrative side, because when I was president of the federation, it was soon after the Olympic Games, and I was just thinking about retiring. And so in the USEF, the new USEF, and I was the first president, everybody wanted me, you're going around and, trying to get it. Come on, let's go. Everybody together in 18 different disciplines.
Yeah.
Breeds and disciplines. So they all wanted me to ride.
They all wanted you
to ride.
To ride.
So wherever I go, whatever show I would go or whatever competition I go to, they always wanted me to ride. So I got to sit on 5-gated horses and Arabian horses and parade horses and reiners and cutters, and straight down the ride.
Wow.
I got to sit on, they wanted me to sit on everything. So now you get to sit on a 5-gated horse and you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here. Tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And then I did that out in Missouri and the thing would let go and you're like, and there was a mare. And I'm like, oh, she gets this.
Cool.
And you're like, oh, because it's a very different look from the way we do things, right?
Yes.
But it's all like, oh, she gets this. And so you've always understood it. And the same thing with the other horses that they always get to sit on.
Wow.
Got to do a bunch of reining. That was fun. Blast.
That is fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. And it was it was a great opportunity, which I always took because I'll do that, and what's that feel? What's that feel like?
So you said something just now that when you said you came from it was a very angry time in our sport. What did you mean by that?
The USET and the AHSA were having a big fight about who was going to be the National Federation and NGB. And it was quite long. It was very angry. And so, and the USEF was born out of that.
Okay.
So USEF was started in 2023.
Another fun.
No, 2003.
2003.
2003.
Another piece of fun trivia for everybody.
A little trivia in 2003. And I was kind of ended up being in the middle of the negotiations and kind of mediator person, which is kind of who I am anyway. And
it's an important role.
They said, fine, we'll, after stuff, fine, we'll create this new organization. We go like that, but you have to be president. And I had no thought process of being that.
Really?
None. but it was part of the deal to make the deal done. So, and it ended up being there for us. I stupidly, I said I would do it for a year, and 9 years later, I gave it up. So I have a hard time saying no.
At Connaway and Associates Equine Insurance Services, they understand how special your horse is. That's why I personally chose to work with them to insure my horses before we embarked on this epic journey across the country. I chose them because their agency writes coverage in 48 states. They also work with several A-rated admitted insurance carriers, so you have options and can select the insurance coverage that best suits your own unique needs. Having confidence in my insurance selection allows me peace of mind on this journey. I can focus on my horses and embrace these learning opportunities of a lifetime. Who better to trust with the insurance of your horse than a team of fellow horse people? Connaway and Associates was founded in 1992 by Laura Connaway, herself a Grand Prix show jumping rider. Laura and her experienced team have built a strong reputation as a reliable partner, building relationships through service, trust, and understanding. Explore www.connaway.net or call them for competitive, personalized insurance coverage options from their team of like-minded equine insurance professionals. Whether we're deep in the Rocky Mountains or down in the heat of Florida, we trust YETI products on this journey of a lifetime. From the Roadie 48 cooler to the YETI mugs you see right here in the studio, YETI coolers and drinkware are built tough, smooth, and ready for anything the horse world has in store for us. I want to go to talk about the giving back because I do think that's a really important piece. But before we do that, in the 90s, that was a very pivotal time for the horse world. Mm-hmm. And when you look back and you like, we're talking about history, in the 90s was when this term, natural horsemanship, was kind of coined, right? And there was an evolution or a revolution of thought in that, like, that we can reference in terms of things started to become, when we talk about the commercialization, or like the things were starting to become mainstream when we look at an approach to horsemanship. Would you agree with that?
I would. And I think there's a lot of things that came together. You know, if you go, again, the little bit, the history thing, like if you go back in the 1920s was probably the largest time that we had more horses in the United States than any time that we've ever had. About 23 million horses that we had in the United States in the 20s.
Wow.
By 1950, that actually went down to 3.
Wow.
Because mechanization and all your military is not involved anymore, you know, and then now it's built up to somewhere between around 7 million.
Okay.
So it's built up, and it's actually built up, you know, I would say because of sport, not despite sport. And there's 3 buckets. There's racing, there's recreation, and then there's the sport horse world.
Yeah.
And fun enough, all 3, they're pretty equal financially. Just the economic impact that they have on the United States, which is huge. It's like $112 billion of the economic impact. So when you go to look at those things, and people in the recreational world are in horses, there's about 39 million people that are interested in horses in the United States. There's 370 million people. So that means 90% of the people don't.
Yeah.
And if you think about back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, right, you would have actually everybody would have seen a horse every day.
Yes, 100%.
Right? Downtown, pulling beer, you know, groceries, taxi, whatever.
Like cars are for us today.
Exactly.
They were such an integrated part.
So there was always the connection. Now we have 90% of the population that really has they won't maybe never see a horse, ever. Or so the connection's not there.
Yes.
And so people, you know, interested in horses, they want to be around the natural side, which I think is, you know, always animals. And that's very good things for humans, because I think we have to be good for horses, humans, right? So it's not just that horses, that we have to be good for them in orders, because we know what they do for us. Right. So it's what the horse actually does for humans. I think it's something we don't celebrate. We celebrate a lot the other way. Well, they need to celebrate what they do for us.
Yeah.
Well, then people, because of that, not having that connection and not having that ability to have that connection all the time, some of the older ways of this natural horsemanship side become way more interesting to people because they find they can make their everyday life better with the horse.
Mm-hmm.
From a recreational side, just my everyday backyard horse. How can I have that communication? And I think it was born off of that. Most of the techniques were already there. I mean, it's been...
Or like some of them are quite old.
And very old, right? Because if you're riding around in Wyoming and I got to go fix fences.
Yes.
And I'm going to be gone for 3 days.
Yeah.
When I get off my horse,
mm-hmm.
I'm really hoping that he stands there.
Yeah.
Because I'm 100 miles away from home.
Yeah.
So you better stand there.
Mm-hmm.
And also in that time, in the, and time of working horse, having working horses like working cattle and sort of like that, the horse also became very reliant on the human for their safety,
mm-hmm.
When you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And those techniques were there, and then a lot of those techniques, diminished.
Yes.
And what I see here is that it's come back, and then people have commercialized it and capitalized on it. And then again, you cannot put that down too much, disdain it too much, because I do believe that in the end, it has a huge benefit overall. And it creeps into the sporting world and it's crept into the sporting world. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of people now, using techniques, online techniques, at competitions. I see it in the jumpers, I see it in the dressage, and I see it in eventing, and even in Europe, same way. So you're seeing it creep in. They're like, there's another way. There's another thing. And that's always the first question. There must be another way. And when you go start to look for those techniques and those theories and those thought processes, there's going to be nothing that is not going to benefit you in the end. And you're in a place that it doesn't replace everything. I still think of myself a very classical dressage rider.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's these 7 other tools that got put into that. And there's these 40 other tools that got put into this. So now my toolbox is, or, you want, not just me, but you want your toolbox to be never ending. And because you always have tools and techniques and directions, I can go here, I can go here, I can go here. That's where the anger goes, because there's a great expression that says violence starts where knowledge stops.
Ooh.
So in the end, if you have the knowledge and you have the tools, well, then there's just another way. There's another thought process. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do now. I mean, I just, helping people with horses is just go, hey, no, just think about it this way. And then suddenly there's an answer.
And actually, as you were speaking, it reminded me of something that a gentleman by the name of Frank Barnett said to me, which is you have knowledge, but you must couple that with experience to acquire wisdom.
Sure.
Otherwise, if you don't have, and he said there are lots of people in the horse world that have experience, but maybe not as much knowledge. And there's lots of people that have lots of knowledge, but maybe a little less experience. Yeah. And you need them both.
Absolutely.
To truly become, I think, like the horseman or the horsewoman that you aspire to be.
And that's never ending, right? Because you're always looking for new knowledge, which you're going to get from a lot of different sports and lots of different places and lots of different things that people do with horses. So that's a never ending
journey
addition, right? And experience is, something that you just gain on the way, but I think I really do believe that in anything that you have to be the student and you have to be the never ending student. There's always something, I'm here at the Road to the Horse thing and I come here because I want to watch and learn. Oh, that was a cool, I saw a couple moves this morning. I was like, well, that's a cool move. I got to try that. So it's becoming a never-ending student. And I'm lucky because I get to watch a lot of high-end horse sports.
Yes.
In my roles that I play. So I get to study that a lot.
Yeah.
And most of the time, I'm not usually watching the competition. I'm usually going to the warm-up.
Same.
So just watch the warm-up.
It's amazing how you come to appreciate.
Totally.
When I was at League of Nations, I was watching the warm-up more than I was watching the main arena, although the main arena was pretty remarkable.
But that's the study. And
Yes.
you just have to be the never-ending student and always with the open mind. And then again, it's not a replacement of things that you already know. It's just additions. You just add these 2 or 3 tools and add those 3 tools, and they'll come back to be use or thought processes or theories. So it's not just replacing, it's always just adding.
You talk about the question, there must be another way, right? So we talked about the evolution or the reintroduction of natural horsemanship practices in the 90s and the buzz and the discussion and some of the anger or the confusion or that took place. Do you feel, so that's like 30 years ago or so.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're 2025. Feels like we're in one of those other changing of tide moments, but more from a sports side of things, where maybe some people are saying, hey, is there another way? Or is there ways in which we can think about this differently?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of discussion, and because now in the 90s there wasn't as much, now the world is available to us, almost in excess, right?
Oh, by far in excess.
Right. Even like you said, I never thought about that, but online, on Spaceline has transformed. Yeah. Thank you. It's for everyone who's listening, David just held up his phone.
Oh my God. It's the most, it's an awful thing in some ways.
It's a weapon and a tool.
It's a weapon. Because things get out of context, put in context, whatever,
all the time.
All of the things, instant opinions that are anonymous, and all of those things are, not helpful, but they're not going to go away. It's the reality of the situation, and you have to be aware of it. I said a number of years ago, and I believe this, we talk about this in the Federation all the time, is that you have to be able to train in the middle of Central Park. And that people like watching you train. And you can explain it. And they think that's pretty cool. And if you can't do that, then you probably shouldn't do it. And then there's, okay, well, if I can't do that, where's the other way? I mean, there's another way. There are other ways to be able to do things like that. And that's the reality of the world that we live in. There's that phone's not going away. The internet's not going away. It's only going to get more. So it's the reality of people that, again, in that 370 million people out here, 90% of them don't actually, have anything to do with horses, but they're going to have an opinion at some point because they see something that they may not like. And are you in a place where you can, 1, explain what you're doing, and 2, the society will accept what you do if they feel like that the horses are being taken care of, and that they have a life, and that you're not just putting them in places where they don't have a life. And you think about, circus animals not here anymore, or you think about the change in the marine world, how that's changed. Greyhound racing, is now illegal in, I think 48 states here in the country now. So because the society said, wait a minute, they don't have any life. There is no life. Where I think we can always say that our horses have a life in the sport world, and we have to be willing to show it. We need to be willing to say that come in here and have an open barn policy.
Yes. That
anybody can come in and watch us do whatever we want to do every day. And there are practices, there's no question, that were prevalent 30 years ago and that are not acceptable anymore, which is a good thing.
Yes.
It's a good thing. And again, change from that commodity to companion side, change from the social side, media, all of those kind of things are all circles that are connected. And you have to say, okay, what are we gonna do about it? And you can't protect the past. You got to know the past, where you come from. But if something needs to change and it's still in the benefit of horses and people and the relationship, then you got to see it.
So for everyone who's listening or watching this episode and they feel maybe a little bit confused or overwhelmed or unclear as to what actually is changing and why is it changing, what are some sort of standout, or what's a bit of a guidebook that you could offer everyone, all the stakeholders within the world, within the horse world, because one thing, as you held up the phone, so one of the most, I think, apparent aspects to having a cell phone and having access to social media and a lot of information, now we have AI, which is a major aggregator, is it's overwhelming, actually, the amount of information, which is why I think a lot of opinion-led media is actually helping guide people through it, because to cipher through all the information can, one, be nearly impossible for a lot of people, just given the current sort of state of people's lives. So everyone who's listening to this episode or watching the episode, what are some sort of guidelines that you would offer them as they navigate what they witness to be a big changing of tides?
Yeah, we get down into the side of horse welfare, which everybody talks about worldwide, or animal welfare. It's not even just horse welfare, it's animal welfare. And really where you're going down to is that we, as humans, right, have the responsibility that we're guardians of them, right? We take care of them, right? In exchange, we'll work for food. So in exchange for our care, because remember that in the end, the horse is actually, the species is thriving.
Yes. Through
our care, not because we're turning them all loose. If you turn them all loose, the species would not thrive.
No. Not at the numbers that they currently exist at.
So in the end, the species itself is actually thriving. That's looking at it from that side of the equation. Yeah. But when you get down into the everyday side, you talk about what's the quality of life that they have. High performance horses are spoiled rotten. In that they are cared for and they're looked after and they're, yes, they play a game that's at a very high level, but they're really, really, really taken care of very well. But when you start to study what's a horse's life, and their overall life, are they going to be happy every single moment of every single day? No, I am not. You're not. Why would we say that that's going to be? But is the quality of their life like pretty cool? Yes, I think that's what you have to prove. And people do that different ways. In our world, in my world, our horses are out, 18, 19 hours a day. They're turned out, and we believe in that. They're social, they're not turned out on their own, most of them. I have one that's turned out on his own only because he rips all the blankets off the other horses and I can't afford it. Do they have the ability to be social? Right. And you could talk about the 5 domains with all animals about being able to do that. And, you talk about their environment, you talk about their mental, happiness. Well, happiness is kind of the wrong word. Mental health. How they can interact socially with other animals because they are a social being, and they're great because you can replace some of that interaction with other horses with a human, which is what we study. That's a fairly great, an unusual trait that not all animals will give.
Yes.
So you put it onto that type of side, and understand some of the science behind it, as well as the emotional side of it. And that's how you can judge yourselves. I think you've seen, like, in the way that I got some things that we put in categories, right? Because then you can put things in categories. Where are you on that line? And I think you can do that with the horses too, in their contentment is the word that I would use. Are they content? Are they content to work? Are they content to be around you and horses, other horses in the environment that we are? Are they content about being in a trailer? And that is something that I think people can look for,
So the 5 categories that you explained were environment, mental health, socialization or relationships.
Yeah, and their environment in 2 ways. One, indoors, what their physical environment is, stalls, versus, because not every horse can you get turned out, all the time.
Yeah.
But what is their ability for that? And then they're free from negative aspects of their physicality, right? So injuries.
Yes.
air,
Yeah.
and things like that. So free from that. So something that they use as the 5 domains, and lots of other herd animals, things like that. So, and you just can apply that to horses also. So not all of the information is relevant, I would say. You can get caught up, but I think the contentment of horses and animals and is a really important part of that side. And the human has to provide that because they're under our care, and you have to provide the aspects of that. And that I think is really important. That's our responsibility of the partnership. That is our responsibility.
And I think it's really a beautiful invitation to think of those 5 areas as like sort of even to personally measure or score yourself.
Sure.
In those 5 categories within your horses. And not all are going to be 10 out of 10. Some of them might even have areas where you might think, oh, there's an opportunity for me to improve. And how could I improve those things? When it comes to sort of, we're seeing a lot of changes. We're seeing a lot of, there's been a lot of shift in regulation. There's lots of shifts happening in regulation. And I think for the majority of the horse world that's sitting back and sort of watching what they're seeing take place on a sport level, a common comment I've seen online, speaking of that word, that I think the horse world would really want me to ask you is, who do we look up to now? Because with sort of different high profile riders being met with what I call controversial situations and being met with, I would look at it from my personal point of view. I look at it as just like they've met their imperfection. No rider, and I've had so many remarkable horsemen and horsewomen in the studio say, I have done things with my horses that I wish I hadn't, that I wish I knew better.
There's nobody that won't.
Yes. So that's the truth, is that we all make mistakes and we all are met with our own humanity or our own imperfection very often, I think, in horses. I think optically now the horse world is witnessing the imperfection of high profile riders maybe at a higher rate than what we're used to. And I think I notice that it's kind of, it's getting a couple people down, and they're kind of going, and I've seen this recurring over across different platforms. Who do we look up to now? Like how do we look for mentors or idols or riders that we admire without worrying, well, are they not able to basically train in the center of Central Park, right? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say that's a very interesting conversation, because I think there's reasons where there's groups like the USEF, right, that have to be the regulatory body, because there's always going to be the outliers, and you're always, there's so many rules in the rule book that would technically kind of have somebody's name on it.
Right.
And that's constantly evolving, right? And so does the USEF have some credibility? And it's always behind the game.
Whoa. Unpack that.
You have to, because in the end, it is a regulatory body, right? So in the end.
So you mean the Federation, USEF, is always behind.
Always a little bit going to be behind.
Reacting to what is happening.
Sure. Right.
Okay.
As new things, let's say drugs or whatever, drug abuse, right? So you're always just one step. God, they're using that. And then you go out and make it illegal or whatever. So, because there's always going to be bad players. There always are. I don't care what sport you're in. I don't care what part of life you're in. There's going to be some bad eggs out there, or people that are pushing it too hard, and that's a reality of life. It's an unfortunate part of life, but so the USEF has to be very, very strong about regulatory and keep pushing when things are outside the boundaries.
As does the FEI.
As the FEI, right? And the IOC. I mean, you can put them the same way, right? They're also all the way down the rule, up and down the governance side. The governance has to be true, and it has to be fair, because we have a legal process here in the United States, and it's done that way. So you always have a right to be heard. If you have something that you are accused of, you have the right to say it. It takes a long time, unfortunately, just like being in a regular court system.
Yes.
Takes forever, and everybody's impatient because it was on the internet yesterday.
Yeah.
And how come you haven't killed this person, right? And how come they're not strung up by a tree? Because you go through the process, the investigation, kind of like, I always go like Law and Order, right? Yeah. Police do the investigation, and then you turn it over to the courts, and the courts, they're not the same. Well, it's the same thing here, and it takes a while. And people get very impatient with that.
Due process.
Yeah, and it's not public because you do your investigations just like police do, right? You do the investigations behind the scenes, right? Because you can change the evidence if it suddenly becomes public. And so it's well, and I think it's a governance thing, and it's hard to do. But I think the USEF does it actually very well, and they do it with the best intentions. And are very progressive about it, including the fairness side as well as the trying to be aggressive to try to take out players that shouldn't be playing that around that level. And then, you just have to believe. It's still anything that you have to believe in people, right? And you have to, at some point, you're going to have heroes that fall off of their white horse. But in the end, you have to believe in people. And I happen to be a person that I still have my heroes that I go down there, and including some of their faults that I would accept. And there would be lines in that acceptance that now you've crossed the line, right? But so you still have to have the belief in the people, that basically people are trying to want to be good. I will hold that to my grave because I do believe that, and I know there's bad actors, and when you have ethical lines in your mind of what you think would be, you can't cross that line. You can make a mistake, but you can't cross the line. And you can't cross a line that is systematic.
Right.
And if that's a systematic way you train horses, then I want no part of you. If you make a mistake, then you make a mistake. And did you learn from it? Did you admit it? Did you learn from it? If you admit it, you do learn from it. And I don't want to do that again, and I'll find another way. You have to.
Well, and I think a lot of high-profile riders who have gone through that process, I think they have an opportunity to represent that human experience that when you make a mistake. And I mean, I can only imagine how challenging that must be to make a mistake on a public stage, and then the horse world can be, like many worlds, can be ruthless and cruel. But I think I like you believe still in the ability for people to be better. I too believe in that people want to be good, but that they make mistakes.
O ye of, what is it? Is it, O ye that is without sin, throw the first stone.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Right.
And you're like, okay, come on now. So, but I think admitting it is always, I think that's the big thing, is that if you do make a mistake, or if you've gone down that road, you have to be able to admit it out in public, and like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm trying to I'll find another way to be able to get the same achievement. I think the honesty is really, really important. And one thing I look for.
I would go as far as to say that level of honesty and vulnerability is a tremendously radical act of love to the horse world.
Absolutely.
If our high profile riders can, I didn't mean to do this is almost a call to action, but it's I do believe that that high profile riders have an opportunity to demonstrate in the way that they've demonstrated great riding, or they've demonstrated the pinnacle of their sport or whatever. They have a tremendous opportunity to demonstrate what it is to be honest and to be vulnerable, which I think is actually the antidote to everything at the moment.
Sure, because I think, you listen to all these natural horsemanship guys, when you get them all together, right?
When you get them all together.
Well, and, there's been some podcasts that are around with it, or interviews, where the 3 or 4 or 5 of them are together, and they'll all start with the same thing. I went here because of the mistakes that I've made when I was a kid, and my horses paid for it. And that same way, I was looking for another way. And they all say it. There's nobody that doesn't say it. And suddenly they find another way, and then they're the most beautiful things you've ever seen. Da 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 da, and everybody's crying, and it's the most amazing. And they all say, "I was not this way when I was 15." Well, hopefully now this next generation now is starting there.
Yeah.
So when they are 15, they don't have to go through the things of that, right? Because they've got a mentor that is helping them along, so they don't have to go there. So their knowledge gets, there quicker.
We've raised the bar.
And you raise the bar. And then suddenly that next generation will be brought up with this. And that's what you're going to see in the future.
And that generation that we speak of also needs, we talk about history and understand how far we've come or where we've come from, right? If they start without knowing the mistakes that have been made, the humility that comes with that mistakes, then that's where I think sometimes we fall into a little bit of the virtue signaling that can be also really challenging in the horse world.
Sure.
Right? Which is and you said that comes back to the ye who has not sinned. Right?
Yeah, right. Throw the first stone. Yeah, so I think, and again, I think the honesty is a big part of that, right? So if we can talk about it, and you have people that are high profile people willing to talk about it and talk about their journey on to the next, what was next, and what they found, and that's a story. That's a huge story and a good story that our kids, the younger generation, are going to be brought up starting there instead of starting farther on down the road, like a lot of us did.
Do you think we do a good enough job in this world?
Just starting.
Yeah?
Just starting.
Do you think we are creating in this?
We're sitting here in a podcast talking about it.
Yeah.
So yes.
We're creating an environment, because I think to be honest and to be vulnerable requires a sense of safety.
Sure.
Often. And I wonder whether we, are we creating a safe environment? I think, yeah, we stare at the podcast mic, that's what this is about.
Yeah. And, I've gone, somebody like me, right? I've had a great career. I thoroughly enjoy horses. Yeah. I enjoy helping people with horses, and I enjoy that aspect of having an apprentice, with the ones that I've had over the years, lots of them, that are good. They're known for being good horse people. Yeah. Out of what we've done, and so I thoroughly enjoy that side, and that's my time of my life. That's I don't want to compete. That's done.
You're Obi-Wan Kenobi now.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's the idea of can you help people along the way to show them that other ways can be built in from the beginning. And so talking about it is really huge. I don't mind being criticized for it in some ways. I've already been through that. They thought I lost my mind when I started this, when I brought it into the sport world. Yeah. They thought I lost my mind. Well, okay, well then fine. I just lost my mind. And you just keep going. And then the same thing and I fell off, on television for a living. So you're not going to embarrass me that way. So, what are you doing? You're going out there and preaching, you're showing a message. It's not just preaching a message. I think you show it. And I think there's talking about it, but then you show it, and you show it all the time.
Actually, it reminds me.
Actions are important.
Yeah, it's something. So Patrick Sullivan, who I got introduced to through Tick Maynard, he just went on social media, actually. Patrick, this is a shout out to you. He went onto social media and he said, a lot of people talk. But, if you say something, show me. Right. Show me what it is that you mean. Because I will understand more if you show me than if you tell me. Right.
No, the actions of how we do things are really, really important. And how we show the next generations, not just one, but generations of what that possibility brings. Oof.
So my final question before we go into rapid fire, which is
Uh-oh. That scares me already.
You talked about being in this chapter of your life, which is about mentorship. And I'm so glad you've talked about mentorship, because I think it is one of, not just in the horse world, but in life in general, one of the greatest gifts that you can receive and give. You're in that phase of your life. And I've mentioned this in a couple of podcasts that I've some wise humans have said that to live a full life, you spend the first part of your life learning, you spend the second part of your life earning, and that can be financially or wisdom or accolades, whatever. And then they spend the third part and the final part of your life returning. Mm-hmm. So you're someone who has obviously dedicated yourself to that belief system. That mentorship is very important, returning.
Yeah, it's the only way. I mean, I was mentored all the way through, not just from somebody from a volunteer side like my mother, but, Jimmy Wofford's and the people like that. And our sport is small. Remember, we've only got 7,500 people that are actually playing the sport. And you probably have, 300,000 people in the United States that are interested in eventing,
right?
In some ways. So it's small. So if you don't take care of it, who's going to? And we teach all of our apprentices that they've got to be a part of it. They've got to step into committee work. They got to do administration because you got to be able to take care of it. So, and that mentorship, I was tapped on the shoulder, told to sit in a chair. That's where you're going to be. And, then liked it and, seemed to be okay at it. So it probably went a little farther than I thought with being, all the roles that I've ended up playing. But I think it's really important, and I take it very, very seriously about the future, passing it on, giving those guys the same opportunities that I had, basically, right? Because I was brought up underneath that system. And so you're passing it on because, I've had an unbelievable run. And so you're like, okay, well, I want these next guys to have the opportunity to have a great run. Now, part of it's up to them, and yes, but you got to set it up. So I think mentorship is really, really important. So, as you said, is in everything that you do.
Yeah.
I did a speech up in, I was given an award by the USOPC, and I did a thing where I said, all right, so everybody close your eyes. Go ahead. Okay. Close your eyes. And then can you see a mentor in your life, right? Can you see who that person is? Visualize a person that was an effect on you, right? And then I was like, so can you see him? So then I'm like, okay, open your eyes. And then I'm like, all right, so if I'm in your world, business or sport or wherever and all that kind of stuff. And I went into your world. Where'd they see you? And for me, that's it. That's why we don't do the video, right? Yeah. So would they see you? And that's the whole point. You got to pass it on. So
I can feel that sense of responsibility in you. I can feel it. It's very tangible.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. Well, I do, right, because of the other mentors and all that kind of stuff. But, I do feel you want to, you change horses' lives in the way that you do things. That's fun. That's enjoyable. That's fascinating. It's never ending. And can you help in some ways to do the same thing with people, guide them along so they can have the same opportunities and enjoy the same passion that I do.
I don't think I ever realized this as much as I do in this very moment with you, that great mentors make great mentors.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because I had great people bring me up, like I said, my mother's from the volunteer point of view. She gave her whole thing, and, for lots of different reasons and all that kind of stuff. But she really did volunteer a lot. And I think you do have to give back. And, and the mentors that you had, the Jimmy taking me under his wing and Jack doing it and Lars Hederholm, where they all just like, all right, here, you need to play this game. And felt that it was very important. And you get a ton out of it. Everything that I do, all of the things that I end up doing, whether, like right now I'm doing some work for the Army, right? So, and with the caissons, and I'm learning a ton out of them. Or if I was president of the Federation, the amount you learned was way bigger than what you were putting in. I've felt that with all of the roles that I've ended up playing, is that you end up getting more out of it.
Then you realize.
And then you apply it onto the next thing, and it just makes you that more well-rounded, I guess, But having the opportunity to step into those worlds, you will end up learning so much. International politics, with the FEI or, and like I said, in the Army, of how they do things and how they make decisions, which is fascinating to watch, and very un-Army like of what you would think Army is like.
Yeah.
These are really, really good people, and they're really smart, but the bureaucracy is so big. That's the hard part about it. So I think you end up getting more out of it. The more you do, the more you get out of it. So what you learn from different aspects.
I think it's a really powerful message for everyone who's listening, who is maybe thinking about mentoring someone else in the horse world, that they could receive more than they think, because I can tell it really feeds you.
Sure.
And I've talked to other people in the horse world that dedicate themselves, that really feel of service in the form of mentorship. And they look at me dead straight in the eye, David, and they say, it feeds me.
Sure. No, the service is important. I do, and there's some people that are good at it and some people are not. Mm-hmm. Some people have the patience for it, or some people don't, because you do have to be patient, because you have to have people, just like horses. Horses, you set it up so that they find it.
Yes.
Well, people the same way. You try to set it up so that they find it, because if they find it, they remember it and they learn from it and they take it.
Yeah.
So it's the same thought process, I think. It's always better to get people. I've always thought about it in the end. If you can get the other person to say what your idea was, and that might take a while, might take a long time, to tell you the truth. That is that's that guiding side. But they take it with them, and they remember it.
I've never.
Same thing.
I've never realized how deep the parallels are between mentoring horses and mentoring people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't just tell people, kids and all that kind of stuff that are finding the way. You can't just tell them what to do all the time.
Just like you can't tell horses.
And you can't tell them, right? You set it up so that they find it. And if they find it, they remember it. And you close the doors. You're like, I've helped Mia a lot now, and she's been with me for 7 or 8 years, and still a very, very much part of my life, or Lauren, like that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, half the time, nope,
close that
and
door.
that's enough. Don't go down that road, and they'll find another one, And then you're like, there you go, but that one's not going to get you there.
And that's where mentorship is really important.
Absolutely, yeah. But telling them what to do every step of the way, they just stop thinking. And you're really trying to teach, I think, all of the upper level riders, especially with those guys that are, talented and they've got feel and all that kind of stuff. You're trying to help them, teach them a way to think. You're not teaching them how to ride. You're teaching them how to think.
But it's the same. But this is how we started.
Totally.
We talked about Jean Lewis and teaching horses how to think.
Totally.
If you tell a horse what to do, you take away their ability to think.
And within the guidelines, right? So you have your responsibilities, and this is the line I want to be on, this is the speed we want to be on, because they don't know, and you're in a good balance. Okay, now there's your job.
Such a mindset shift, right? It's like, how are we mentoring ourselves? How are we mentoring others? And how are we mentoring our horses?
Yeah, I can, and all the management stuff that I do, I can guarantee you I am not a micromanager.
I believe that.
I am not a micromanager, and but also very forgiving if people make a mistake.
That's probably why you're still doing.
And they get a 3-strike rule. You make it again, you're like, come on, no, right? And you do that again, you're right. Now you really don't get it.
Yeah.
But everybody gets the first strike.
Okay, now we get to do rapid fire.
Oh, this scares me. I know what you.
Well, it's not rapid fire. Lots of people. When I ask these questions, a lot of people take their time, because they're not hard, but I think they're introspective. Okay, if you could read one book to the horse world, what would it be?
My first reaction is actually doesn't have anything to do with horses.
That's okay.
Right, it has to do much more with a philosophical side of that. I kind of studied quite a bit the Taoism, of that side of the equation, and I would say the Taoism of sport is a really good book to look at it, because one of the things about Taoism compared to like Confucianism, which was very government oriented and whatever, but Taoism is like the water is going to get to the ocean no matter what. right? It's going to go around the mountain or whatever, but it's going to get to the ocean. And I always thought that was my philosophy. Just be patient because you're going to get there.
I really like that's a really good one. Okay. Who is the most iconic horse in history?
I would probably say in some way Bucephalus.
Love that that's your answer. Okay, why?
Well, again, because that was a horseman that had to figure that out, right? And then had a lifelong relationship with him, right? But when that story of him turning him into the sun because he was scared of his own shadow, then turns into a war horse.
Yes.
That's looking at it from a horse's point of view. So, and in the end, and that story has held
true
for, 3,000 years now.
Yes.
Yeah. Right? 600 BC. Yeah. So, right. So that story is held. And it's actually a horseman's story. So I'm going to have to say Bucephalus.
Great answer. Most undervalued skill as a rider?
Timing. Timing of the release is the most one that is not taught enough. It's taught in a broad aspect. But again, when I think the idea of, where you want to give when the horse changes his mind, not when he's actually physically started. So that I think is the undervalued thing of when you watch somebody that is beautiful to watch. Because I'm always watching the riders, not the horses, because I'm always interested in what are you doing to create that wonderful thing that it's the horses doing. So it's that micro give is, for me, I think the undervalued thing of what happens.
Who is the greatest horseman or horsewoman in history?
Oh,
yeah, not a hard one at all.
I don't know. I don't know if you can answer that. Because I think there are great horsemen and women in every aspect. So, saying one would be a sporting person would be an insult to somebody that might have actually done it through the military system or a farmer. I think it's a really hard to answer because of it's so broad. Because you would it'd be easy to pick a sporting person that's famous.
Yeah.
But is that the best horseman out there? Right? If you talk about anywhere from what Caprilli did to jumping, what Boucher did to dressage, of that aspect, the carpentry, his work in France, that, back in the 1700s, how that put in it. You talk about General Grant being known for a really, really good horseman. So I don't know if there's an answer to that. And I wouldn't want to put one thing above the other just because it's famous.
No, I think that's actually an amazing answer. I think you just gave a very where it's you could answer with one word, you sort of gave an essay, which I love. I love. Okay, and last question. Mares, stallions, or geldings?
I would, fun enough, even though most of my career was done on geldings, because the hormonal side is, not really there. So they tend to be a little bit more straightforward, but I love mares.
Why?
I think their intelligence and their fight. Yeah. And you can't, again, the same thing, you can't just put your thumb on it. You can't tell a mare, bam, this is what you're going to do. It's going to go down that road, but there's a suggestion and negotiation along the way. There's nothing else that's going to happen. But I think the mares, I just love working with mares. I find them, almost more. I was trying to think of the words. They're almost way more engaging. So, mares.
They're great mentors.
Yeah,
I think
definitely mares.
David, I had such high expectations of this podcast, and you completely surpassed them in every way.
Thanks. It's fun to be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by Connaway and Associates Equine Insurance Services. The friendly and knowledgeable team at Connaway and Associates brings together more than 30 years of experience to offer a wide range of insurance services, including horse insurance, farm insurance, and liability insurance. Visit www.connaway.net to explore options or get in touch today. Thank you, YETI, for supporting us on this journey of a lifetime as we traverse the heart of the horse world.